Hi, everybody. My name is Melanie Rogers, and I'm inviting you all to tune in to my show, Flip the Switch, How to Find the Light in Every Dark Shadow, every Tuesday evening at 7 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time on clearsourceradio.com and iHeartRadio. Hey everyone, you are now listening to Flip the Switch, How to Find the Light in Every Dark Shadow on the Clear Source Radio Network. And as always, thank you so much for listening. Hello, everybody. Welcome back, and thank you so much for tuning in once again. You're now listening to Flip the Switch, How to Find the Light in Every Dark Shadow on Clear Source Radio, where people inspire people. I am your host. My name is Melanie Rogers, and I'm going to very quickly get into tonight's extra long show because I have so much to say. Now, I'm going to give you a really quick background. I'm going to try my hardest to stay in a nice level tone and not speed through it. Here's the thing. I will tell you this much. I realized I had so much to say about tonight's topic based on experience and reactions and such in my own life that I went ahead and I recorded in the moment. I recorded a show to see a couple of things, to see if 2 hours would be long enough to talk about all the stuff that I wanted to talk about, to see if... to see where I would go with it, with what's in my head. I kind of wanted to see for myself where I would end up going with everything that I wanted to talk about. And also, and the most important thing, was to see if I got any kind of healing out of putting out what I plan on putting out tonight. Okay? This is a very important show for me personally. You know now that over the last year and a half, and I say this often, but it's very important, that different things I've gone through, different life experiences and such, it's all become about learning myself and trying to inspire other people to do the same, trying to take the positive out of every situation that just feels heavy and such, learning those lessons and kind of teaching people how I at least flip the switch, looking at things from a good perspective, looking at things as a lesson instead of just staying down in the muck when I'm going through a hard time. So this is the purpose of the last year and a half, what I've chosen to do. It's kind of happened that way. I didn't really even choose to do that. Now, part of that is healing, okay? It's teaching people to heal. It's personal to me to uproot any issues that I'm learning I have trapped down inside and to kind of heal in front of everybody else because I think that other people can relate to different situations I talk about. Now, I say this all the time. Tonight's show is very important to me because I've come to realize in a very short period of time how this particular topic that I'm going to talk about, and I think pretty much a lot of people here already know where I'm going with this. With everything going on in society right now, I'm pretty sure you have an idea of where I'm going with this, okay? But I wanted to find out if putting some very, very sensitive information out there to the world, saying it out loud, telling people my stories will help me to finally uproot things in my life that I realized are causing me problems, okay? And that's an exciting thing for me, and it's a very painful thing. And at the same time, I am hoping that I'm going to be one of those women that I'm able to bring up this stuff so that other people can relate and understand that we all do deal with situations differently. Okay, some people can relate and feel, I guess, supported. Other people can understand how You can never determine how somebody is going to respond to very intense situations or build-ups of situations. Okay. Now, I'm going to dive in because what ended up happening, I will tell you this, when I did that recording, and I thought there's sometimes when I do record the show, because in the moment, I've told you this before, in the moment, I'm so strong in the topic and I have to get it out. You know, it's just flooding my brain and I want to get it out. So I will record it and go ahead and play it if I'm comfortable with it when I'm done. And if I feel, I go by my own energy. When I'm done and I feel like, okay, I got out everything I really needed to talk about and I covered everything and it came out the way I wanted it to, I think it's going to be a good show, then I'll just go ahead and put it out there. Okay. So that was part of, what I did was I decided to go ahead and do the show. And what I looked back and realized after doing a 2-hour recording were a couple of things. My first reaction is I felt much better. Okay. So that helped me. That made me realize that putting my stories out there and just being honest about how I feel about different things, but also continuing to do what I do and try to show different scenarios from different perspectives without doing the one-sided thing and going at one side or the other in any given situation. I did this and I was very grounded when I was done, okay, after 2 hours of putting all this intensity out. But at the same time, I also realized that I needed to get that out as step one. I was very grounded because I had so much energy built up inside, and it came out, and some of it came out a little stronger than I wanted to put it out to the public because it's not about me venting. I really want to make sure that people hear it in a positive way. Okay? I'm going to give you a heads up that anyone who's experienced any kind of sexual trauma or any kind of buildup over the years of being mistreated in any way, or even if it's disrespected, whether it's physically attacked, anything, that this may be a trigger show for you. It was a trigger show for me, and I was the one saying it. Okay. Now, I realized that I went all the way up to the end and I still had stuff to say, so I probably should have made it a longer show, but then I figured, you know what? That's just too much. Let's just get out the general gist of what I'm trying to do. Let's pull out all of the areas where I let myself get worked up and I actually got a little aggressive because I'm not trying to rub anyone in a negative way, because when we rub people in a negative way and come off offensive toward certain people, the automatic reaction is to create a defense, and that's not what I'm trying to do with my own show. I'm trying to keep people's minds open. Okay, so I decided to do it again, and I felt like, you know what, that was great that I gave myself that practice round because I was able to get a lot out of me, and now I can sit here and I can talk to you on a more level note. Yes, Rocky's driving me crazy in the background. I can talk to you more level-headed with a little less emotion, and I can get out exactly what I'm trying to get out, and hopefully I will be able to affect all different people looking at situations from all different points of view. Okay. Now, I was also able to organize a little better and decide to do things in a certain order. That way I have more of a chance of getting it out there. I'm going to tell you I basically told you my intentions. I'm asking for you to keep an open mind. Okay, right off the bat, no matter who you are, no matter what you're looking at the current events, and we are talking about sexual assault and accusations of sexual assault. Okay, there's two sides to that. This isn't a show about politics. I'm going to go ahead and tell you why I realized this was so important for me to talk about, because I was highly triggered. And that made me realize that this is such a topic that this is one of my main problems that's been buried. I've talked about it before when I did my Me Too show. I showed you different angles and different sides, and I told you a couple of the stories, okay, attached to my own situations, okay? I didn't tell you all of them, and I don't think I'm going to be able to fit all of them into tonight's show. But I compiled a list of certain ones, and the reason that I'm planning on telling you about these, which is very personal, is I want to explain and make people understand that at any given time, not one other person can determine or decide what a female should or would do under any given circumstance. I'm going to explain that and make you understand that, okay? I'm also going to talk very briefly, but I want you to know that I have just as much passion for the other side when it comes to being accused of these kind of violent scenarios. And the reason I'm going to keep it brief is because I do have a scenario that I'm not going to talk about. I'm going to very briefly tell you about it because it's not my story to tell, okay? However, it affected me deeply. So I am I'm not going to say equally, okay? I'm a female who's been through a lot when it comes to some of this stuff, okay? And I'll explain that in detail because those are my stories. The other part of it is somebody else, somebody I was close to. It's their story, but it did affect me, and I know that they were falsely accused, okay? I am equal. I will tell you that much. I am equal when it comes to the anger on both sides. Now, the reason I'm saying yes, obviously this was started with the very known case out there right now, the political case. I'm not even going to say names, but basically the judge versus the doctor, okay? I'm sure everybody knows about this, all right? Now, I only saw one part of that. I only saw one person being asked questions, okay? I did not hear the other person's side of the story. I have kind of my own opinion based on what I saw on one side, but I'm keeping my opinion completely blank, kind of, because I didn't hear the other side. But the problem, the thing I'm saying is that my show tonight and my reactions have nothing to do with that particular case. I feel for both sides because I don't know the truth, and not one person out there who's listening right now does either, unless you were there. It's part of what I want to talk about. Now, why I got triggered wasn't because that was brought up. We've been hearing about that kind of stuff, especially lately, a lot. The Me Too movement was based on one accusation after another in the acting community, mostly, okay? Now, what I realized really triggered me highly were people's reaction. I'm talking about a lot of people I know, and it surprised me to the point where I was losing respect for a lot of people. But I'm going to talk about that as well. Hypocrisy. I'm going to talk about lack of empathy. I'm going to talk about how you can't put blinders on. You have to be able to at least try to put yourself in other people's shoes, and you can't make decisions based on just your political affiliations. It's gotten that bad where, based on political affiliations, we're questioning people who are either being falsely accused of a horrible crime or a teenager, 15-year-old teenager who claims to be gang raped. Questioning either one of those people without knowing the facts is cruel. The jokes that are put out there right now, I see it on Facebook, and I see them from people who I respected at one point. I had to pull away because I was so highly triggered that I, for the first time, actually set up the don't see, whatever it's called on Facebook, where you stop seeing somebody's post for 30 days because I realized that I was becoming very angry, but I was becoming angry at seeing the ugliness in the people I respected. And it is ugliness. And I'm going to explain why the only way to not become an ugly person in all of this is to not judge, do not assume, do not joke about any of it. I'm sorry, but making jokes about a woman who's claiming to have a sexual assault in her background, that is the ugliest form of anything. To make jokes about a judge whose life, one way or another, is going to be affected forever if he is innocent of being accused. A man being accused of a sexual assault is a horrible thing if it's a false accusation, okay? That is horrible. To joke about either side. I don't care what your political affiliation is. You're talking about people and you're talking about situations, and every time you joke about one of those things because you are so strongly Republican or you are so strongly Democratic and have so much hate in your heart because of the politics out there, you are segregating a huge number of people, okay, who have experienced some of this. Okay? Don't be a hypocrite. Now, let me see. I'm trying to very nicely organize exactly where I'm going to go. I want to talk about a few of, you know what I think I'm going to do? I'm going to talk about a little bit more about my reaction based on what I saw from people. Like I said, I wasn't triggered by the political affiliation at all. Okay, I thought it was horrible. I'm like, here we go again. Wonder who's telling the truth. Either way, it's a sad situation. Okay, I was highly triggered by people's reactions. It's just one more scenario where people are using something as an excuse to be ugly. That makes you an ugly person. That doesn't mean that suddenly you're a beautiful person inside. And I'm not trying to attack people. What I'm saying, this is how I see it, is that you're just love and light inside, but then you have an exception. Like you have a valid reason to show ugliness because so many other people are jumping on board and everyone's deciding the truth. Nobody knows the truth. None of you do. Okay? On either side, none of you know the truth. Don't make it about politics when you say ugly things. You can 100% believe one side or another, and you can be affected by that. But when you start throwing out jokes and you start being so adamant about what did or didn't happen, and you start criticizing women who have claimed or experienced sexual assault, or you start criticizing men as if all men are predators, that's ugly. That's a lot of hate inside. And it's when people are filled with hate that that comes up. That's what I'm seeing. And in order for me not to lose respect for the majority of people at this point, I had to pull away. I had to block a few people's posts from being seen. And I had to get on here and talk about my feelings on the subject. Because I was highly triggered based on my own situations, I decided that this is going to be, and that this is the most important thing for me, is I'm going to tell it. And then I'm going to be done with it. I'm not going to allow what's happened to me over time. And keep in mind, things affect people differently. You could have had the same situations and say things like, okay, that's not even a big deal. Things affect people differently depending on everything, how you grew up, what you've experienced, what kind of person character you are, how much of an introvert versus an extrovert you are, how conservative versus, how, I don't want to say promiscuous because that's not what I'm talking about. There are so many things that determine how empathetic you are. Now, I am a very emotional person because I'm a very empathic person. Things like this affect me harshly. Things I've dealt with in life have affected me my whole life, okay? Maybe somebody else would deal with the same things and be, and look at themselves like, well, I'm the cool girl. I just let it happen. It's no big deal, okay? That's great if you can handle things that way, but not all of us can because some of us, hold that stuff inside. We all process things differently. I've been talking about that till I'm blue in the face on this show over and over again. We all handle things differently. So one of the main things that really bothered me is how many people keep determining and keep saying, and I'm talking women and men alike, what should or shouldn't have happened and how much time has passed. Therefore, an accuser has to be lying. This is part of the reason why I'm going to give you my stories. Okay, anyone who knows me on a personal level, and I'm going to tell you in one moment how this is really valid. Anyone who knows me personally would probably never expect that I would deal with different situations the way I have. But I'm going to tell you from a lot of different scenarios I've had for a couple of reasons. And I'm going to go ahead and start jumping into that part right now. I actually wrote my goals on here. One of my goals is that reactions, like I just said, reactions vary based on so many factors. Our age, I'm going to explain that. As I got older, we change as we get older. A lot of times we become more empowered. We have more experience. We learn more. There are so many things. We climb in rank when it comes to whatever job or military or whatever. There are so many factors that most of us, when we get older, we become more empowered. Okay, so there is a difference between a situation happening when you are 15, 16 years old and a situation happening when you are old enough to say, I'm tired of all of it and nothing's going to happen anymore. Okay, your environment, your peers, the pecking order, your pecking order at work or whatever your scenario is, military and all that, and how naive you are. And you know what? That applies to me completely. So that's one of the reasons I'm going to tell you in chronological order a lot of the scenarios that have built up in me. The reason I'm telling you this is so that you understand, like I said, this is going to be twofold. Part of this is to make people understand that this rape culture we are in, and that's exactly what it is, a rape culture, okay, how bad it is and how much it affects people in a different way so you can never decide. Nobody can decide for anybody else how they should or could have or would have handled a scenario because you weren't in their shoes. Okay? But also, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put it out there so that you understand, like I am starting to realize, because this is what I keep doing, is I'm peeling like an onion. I had a show about that. Things keep coming up, and as I'm trying to get to know myself better and I'm understanding where my issues lie, and I am bound and determined to get them up and deal with them, actually deal with things that have been trapped inside so that I can be pure and in my intentions, pure in my actions, and I can live a pure life. And when I say that, I mean without a bunch of garbage causing me to react in ways where people don't understand, or suppressing my happiness, or suppressing who I truly am. So I'm trying to inspire people as well to understand how important it is to allow this stuff to come up. So the positive part of this being triggered, like everyone is triggered right now, is that it's showing us where we need to heal. See? So there's a good in this, all right, as difficult as it is. Number 2 in my goals is to understand the changes. Well, I said that. Understand the changes that we go through as we get older. Therefore, we are going to handle things in a different way. And also as things build up. You can have a scenario that happened once or twice and you don't think twice about it. Somebody makes an off, classless joke towards you or a sexual comment or whatever. And if it just happened, you might be a little surprised, but how many people are going to react in a really angry way? But when that's consistent, or you've had any kind of sexual assault or anything like that, it will get to a point where you just get angry. And then somebody can say the smallest things and you're going to snap. That's a factor, folks. You can't get into somebody else's shoes and say, or somebody else's head and say, well, if this happened, you should have done this. You can't do that. You don't know how much is built up. You have no idea what triggers people, okay? And number 3 goal is to heal myself and help others understand, like I said, how important it is to understand what is truly trapped inside, get it up, be willing to process it so that you don't hold on to it forever. So you're going to follow me along with my healing process. Okay, that's what we've been doing the last year and a half. I don't know how much further that's going to go, but I think this is a key. I think right now, tonight is a key in my life. And I think that my show has been a huge part of that. Okay, I think that it's gotten me in this frame of mind of healing and processing and understanding myself because I have goals. You guys are part of my goals, okay? Sharing this with you so that people can relate and possibly understand and feel supported as well. Like you're not the only ones out there who feel certain ways. That because of all that, I don't know which way it went, chicken or the egg. Because of all that, I am learning so much more about myself, and I am actually more content to bring things up and try to process them, or the other way around. Maybe as I'm at this certain age where things are coming up and I'm understanding what's been trapped and what's causing me problems in possible relationships and making me put up boundaries and automatically getting defensive over scenarios that trigger things from my past and all that, that could create the show. Okay, so chicken or the egg, it doesn't matter. But I realize that in this case, it's perfect for me. It is my venue to help others and help myself at the same time. So those are my goals. Now, I ask that you start off, like I told you, it's going to trigger some people. Some of the scenarios might anger you. Some of the scenarios you might tend to say, please, that's no big deal. But like I said, we're different. You could have grown up and tough part of I don't know. And little things you don't really care. They could be things that you joke around when you're young or whatever. And I'm different than that. Okay. So some people may be triggered. What I'm telling you is that some people may be triggered in an angry way, men or women, depending on what I'm saying. The most important thing is no matter what I'm saying, you know that my intentions are not I'm not one side or another. It's to open up your mind to everything, okay? To pay attention to the fact that you don't know everything. And if you keep your minds open, then those things that may trigger you that I may say, they won't. You'll keep your mind open to the possibility that you may be reacting to something because you immediately close your mind from any other possibility. Okay. Now, I'll describe that a little bit later, but I'm going to try to get through. When I initially did this recording, I ended with my scenarios and then I ran out of time. So I basically ended the show by telling you all of these things that affected me leading up to the big one for me. And then I had to end the show. So I felt like that wasn't how I wanted to end the show. I wanted to be on a more positive vibe. Okay. Now, these are some scenarios that I went through life. Keep in mind, if you are a person like me, I was a teenager who I have always tried to defy stereotypes. I still to this day, every once in a while, will tell my parents, I'm like, you have absolutely no idea how good you had it. You didn't realize that. I was different than other teenagers because I was always trying to defy stereotypes. The stereotypical teenager would try to sneak out or be a problem child or whatever, have an attitude, whatever. I was always trying, from the beginning of time, always trying to defy stereotypes. That's why I'm so touchy about stereotypes. I don't fit into those boxes, okay? But with that being said, I was very naive. I was very, I guess, goody-goody. In a certain respect, you can say goody-goody because I always wanted to please my parents. Now, that started with other things, okay? But I realized that I was a people pleaser when I was young because I was trying to win over basically my family, try to show them that I was good, okay? It took me a while to realize that about myself, okay? I was a late bloomer when it came to sexual activity. I will be honest and tell you that. I'm making myself vulnerable tonight, and here's why, because there's nothing bad that can come of it. And I think it could be nothing but therapeutic for me to just say it out loud, things I've experienced, because now in this last week, I've become so aware of how much of an impact this stuff has had on me, and I'm really trying to get rid of it. Okay. So, like I said, I was a late bloomer. I will tell you I lost my virginity when I was 19, which, believe it or not, is late bloomer in my age group. Okay. My 80s, I grew up in the 80s. And I was not ready. And even when I had my first encounter, it was a bad situation because it was a narcissistic person. He played a lot of head games with me. It was all a big game. It was a conquest game. Basically tricked me and pressured me, and it was fun for him. Now, that's a whole long story. That affected me harshly for a long time, okay? From the beginning of time. But over time, I've come to realize that those were deeply his issues, and I've started to understand what a narcissist is. So I actually feel like I've conquered that one a little more, because those are things that if they would happen to me now, I would sense it in a heartbeat, and I won't put up with it. So let's just say I ended up losing my virginity earlier than I was ready. I wasn't ready, but it ended up happening. So starting off in that way, actually before I went to that part, I'm going to tell you the very first scenario I had, keeping in mind that all of these built up over time, it's a timeline, and that's what I want people to keep in mind. First scenario I ever had, I went to a high school graduation party, okay? I wasn't a partier. I wasn't a drinker. I wasn't allowed to go to parties, okay? So basically, suddenly going to a high school party was a big deal for me. Everyone around me, they used to go and they had been drinking for a couple of years. They do parties and all this kind of stuff. It was new for me. So I went with my friends, and I remember wearing this dress. It was a black dress, like Janet Jackson's. Okay, I loved this dress. It was short, but it was long sleeves, puffy, shoulder pads. And it had one zipper that went all the way from the bottom, left side. You zip it all the way up to the right side, as high as you want, depending on what kind of collar. Okay, so if you can picture the Janet Jackson dress from way back then, it was like that. Okay, now I go to this party, and my friends are all kind of hooking up. One of them actually was hooking up, and it was the first time I walked in, and I was floored because I'm like, oh my gosh, they're my age, and they were actually, having sex in this room when I walked in, and that was like traumatizing to me because I just, that was all new to me. My other friend was kind of making out with somebody we went to school with, and one of my high school friends' cousin was introduced to me. Okay. Now, I started talking to him, and we were kind of the oddballs out because everyone else, like I said, they were over there making out and they were doing all this. And he just started kind of kissing me. Now, it was uncomfortable because I didn't even know him, and I didn't want to sit there making out with this guy that I just met, but it was almost like I was there, so I was supposed to. So he's actually kept grabbing the zipper of my dress and pulling it down. And I kept stopping him, pulling it up. And the thing is, now that could have gone further, but it didn't. I just didn't let it go any further. And I kept like, no, knock it off. The point of that is that's the first time that I was treated in a way that it's like I was supposed to just automatically be with this guy because we were there. We were in the same place. He didn't have anybody else. And he actually described me, I found out short time later, he described me to his cousin and said, she's an ass. Sorry that, I'm swearing on my own show. I don't. Said she's an ass. And it's because I wouldn't have sex with him. I had never even had sex before, and I was not interested in making out with him. It was just everybody kind of departed in their own way, and I was put in a bad situation. But I was just meant to do that. I was supposed to do that. And I was kind of floored by that because it didn't make sense to me. And these are people I went to high school with. I don't necessarily know if they defended me or anything else, but I know what really bothered me was this guy was talking about me in such a derogatory way because I wouldn't just give in. Okay, so that was my first real situation that got into my head. Wasn't a sexual assault. He did stop because I basically, started getting real pushy, like enough, just, get off of me. However, it still put an image in my head and a little bit of anger. Never realized I would hold on to that until this day when I actually started listing things and realized that that was the very beginning of a pattern. Okay. Now, the second scenario that I'm going to talk about, I was in air traffic control school. It's called Air Traffic Control A School in Millington, Tennessee. And this wasn't me, but this was a friend of mine. There was a guy who was there, and he was, everyone thought he was really cute and everything else. He was just known to be the big guy on campus or whatever. So he would go on, quote, I say quote because I was led to believe, and this was very recently on a Facebook post, of a picture I had put out, different pictures from back then, kind of reminiscing. And I noticed, I missed it the first time I put it out because I put this out like 5 years ago, that a couple of the ladies that I went to A school with, they saw his picture and they were going back and forth. One of them said, oh yeah, he was so cute. And the other one started saying, oh really, you think so? Were you one of his victims? Now, I don't think that it meant assault, okay? But the way, because I know these particular ladies. And actually I was roommates with one of them. But going back and forth with each other, they were basically agreeing. They're like, were you one of his, targets or whatever, however they put it. So I realized that he was definitely, and it triggered these memories for me, that this guy was he was a jerk. He had issues apparently with women because the big conquest, or even making things look like it was a big conquest, he was degrading to women. That's what he was. He was degrading to women. Here's this good-looking guy. Everyone has a crush on him. I remember looking at him thinking, oh my gosh, he's just so hot, whatever. I never had anything with him, didn't go out with him, nothing. But he went out with a lot of women. Now, one of these parties, one day after he had gone out on a date with a friend of mine, he's in front of the class. I talked about this on the Me Too show, by the way. He's in front of the class, and he is drawing at the chalkboard. Now, mind you, he's not saying a word, like not one word. He's drawing a picture on the chalkboard, and he keeps adding to it. Okay, it was a picture of him standing there, and he drew a picture of the car, and people are laughing. All these people were chiding him and laughing, and they keep throwing out all these insinuations and, and what else did you do, and blah, blah, blah. And he was talking about her. Well, not talking. He was drawing her. Then he drew a picture of her basically on her knees. Okay, you go ahead and you decide what that means. Now, he never came out and said this is what happened, but it was a big production, and everyone was laughing about it, and he was degrading her in front of the whole class. Now, she's my friend. I went and I told her, because I didn't like that. I said, I just want to let you know, whatever did or didn't happen, he just put it out in front of the whole class, and everyone's laughing about it. And she's like, Melanie, nothing happened. She says, matter of fact, she liked him. She didn't let anything happen because she didn't want to ruin anything anyway. She thought he came off like this big gentleman. But this shows how much of a gentleman he was, because she didn't do anything with him. He came to the school and in front of everyone tried to humiliate her and give her a bad reputation. That's a horrible thing to do to a woman, okay? Whether you've done something or not. That says a lot about the man. I'm sorry, that right there says a lot about the man. Now, what ended up happening, and these, like I said, these are progressions to show you society as well, and to show you the little tiny pieces that get put in a person's mind. In this case, in my mind, over time, all the scenarios, and as they build up over time, to understand why people react the way they do in situations, because it's not all black and white. So, needless to say, my friend, she wasn't going to take that. She is who I am now, okay? Like, I wouldn't take that now. I would make sure that something happened with that, and I would not stop until something did happen. I have more bite in my bark these days than I ever did when I was younger. I just didn't want to cause any problems when I was younger, okay? Now, a lot of that falls back on childhood. I always wanted to be the quiet person that didn't cause any problems, because what are we taught in childhood? To sit there and be quiet. Your kids to be seen but not heard. Now, I'm not putting this on my family. I'm saying it's a cultural thing, but it's things like that create your personality as you're growing up. Okay, so I had that mentality as well, as I never wanted to rock the boat. So my friend was like, I'm not putting up with this. Are you kidding? She was mortified and she was angry. And I would have to say that now looking back, she was probably one of my first good role models as a woman, because she stood up for herself. Now, she went to the chief and she complained about it. And she says, no, this is wrong. She went to a female chief, and do you know what happened? She got reprimanded. Okay, she got reprimanded, and I don't remember exactly why. I think it's because they were drinking. So this chief used that against her to make her quiet. I got pulled in, and I got reprimanded for stirring up trouble. Now, I confided in my friend and let her know what was going on, and I got singled out and shut up by a female chief who right now, if this happened right now, I would not stop until she got reprimanded and hopefully lost her job. I would make such a stink out of it, but back then, what did I do? I was so upset, I held it inside. Then I was segregated, basically, by the people in my class for a while, because they were mad at me, because he was cool. And I told on him. They loved sitting around laughing at her expense, but because they all loved him because he was cool and he was the hot guy, I got segregated. I remember walking into my class and everyone would get real quiet and look at me. Now, the me today, that would empower me. Honestly, the more people you put against me now in these days, and that's been for actually quite a few years, like 20 years, I feel more empowered, because I feel like, okay, now you're pulling out all my stops. I won't be bullied. I will not be put in a corner. Back then, that was horrible for me. Back then, I just sat there and kept visualizing myself, making myself smaller and smaller because I was so embarrassed and I felt so segregated. That's a horrible feeling, okay? Now keep in mind the images that that's putting in my head, the peer pressure. Peer pressure. And I'm sitting here thinking twice about myself, struggling, going, okay, but you did the right thing. You know deep in your heart you did the right thing. But at the same time, I'm going, well, maybe I shouldn't have said anything. Nobody else did. Like, am I this, drama person, or, am I trying to cause problems or whatever? So I struggled with that. Now, I'm going to go on to the next scenario. Keep all this in mind. Now, this is a buildup. Air traffic control, A school, once again. All right. Now, we're finally, Rocky, stop. Sorry about that. I need to stop him. He's in the background giving me anxiety. Okay, so we're still in A school, and my class is finally able to go off base. Now, keep in mind, we are legally allowed to drink, because we're in the military, at 18 years old, but on base. Okay, now we go out. I'm just following the crowd. This is where peer pressure at that age will dictate a lot of how much you're going to say if something happens. This is what I want you to keep in mind. Before you criticize people at a young age for not automatically stepping up to the plate and complaining about something, keep all of this in mind, peer pressure and such. Now we go to this hotel because that's one of the only places we know of that actually has that will let you in at 18 years or older. And I was 19 at the time. They'll let us in if we were 18 or older, and it has a dance floor. So we all went as a group. We got a room so that we can crash there, and we took liquor up into the room. Okay. Now, I'm innocent, believe it or not. I'm following the crowd, yes, but I'm still innocent inside. I was more innocent than a lot of people inside, and I was like mother hen. That's who I was. For a long time, that's who I was. So always keep in mind a person's personality, their shyness level. All of that does matter, okay? Things aren't cut and dry. Now, I go back up to the room. I was going to get a drink. Because, I'm in A school. I'm following everybody else. It's okay to drink. They say, it's okay to drink. You're on base or whatever. But, we knew we weren't supposed to off base. But that's why we put everything up in the hotel room. I go up in the hotel room with one of my schoolmates because he wanted to get a drink as well. Actually, he was going to make me the drink because it was their stuff, whatever. So I went up there with him. Never flirted with this guy. Never had anything to do with him one way or another in any way. He was very quiet, a very quiet, low-spoken person. Wasn't like he was a big party animal. So we go up to the room, and he gets out of nowhere, turns around, and starts kissing me. And I'm like, whoa. So there was absolutely no lead up to that. There was no question. I did not flirt with him. I didn't even expect this. So he starts trying to kiss me, and I pull away. Okay, now mind you, I'm in a hotel room with him. Is that making a good choice? Well, no. Now that I see the effects, now that I see the aftermath, was it making a good choice in the moment? Sure. What's the big deal? I'm with somebody who, another student. I did not have any idea that anyone would ever try to do something. To me, we were all there as a group. We were all supportive of each other. That was in my mind, okay? I wasn't looking at it like I did something stupid. So now I sit here and I'm in a hotel room up there, and he grabs me hard. This could have actually been an assault. He grabs me hard, and I keep trying to push away to the point where he basically bear hugged me and almost covered my mouth. Now that was on the verge of being a forced assault. Okay, I know that because I, in that moment, realized, excuse me, in that moment I realized, oh my God, he is trying to force me. Okay, so I got angry. And that is one of my good defenses, is that I don't necessarily get scared, but I will get angry. I'm a cop's daughter. My dad was a boxer. I'm Italian. I felt very invaded. So I started yelling because I could not get away. I was pushing him away, but I couldn't believe that as hard as I was pushing away and I was telling him no, that he kept grabbing me and pulling harder. So I started yelling and screaming. Now that obviously stopped things because the people beside us called security. All right. Now here's what ended up happening, which is why, stop. We need to stop. I had to correct my puppy because he's giving me anxiety. Stop. Now I want you to consider the surroundings on this one. When people want to say, well, you should have, if I was in that situation, what she should have done. I'm surrounded by my peers. Okay. I'm up in a hotel room alone with the guy, so he can say anything. And people would, in that culture, they would look at me and say, oh, wait a minute. Even though they knew me and they knew that I wasn't that type of person, they also knew him and knew that he was that quiet person. Okay. It'd be like, okay, you're up there drinking. You go up there alone with this guy in a hotel room and you're supposed to tell me that nothing happened. Also, we're illegally drinking. Basically, we are illegally drinking. We are allowed to drink on base, but we're not allowed to drink. That's why we have it up in the hotel room. If I would have, because we got kicked out, okay, because I started yelling, we ended up getting kicked out. Now, if I would have said something about what happened, I already have everyone mad at me because we got kicked out, okay? Everyone's looking at me like I ruined the whole night. And they're looking at me like I'm freaking out, like I drink a little and I can't handle it. And that's not what happened, okay? So I had to deal with that as well. People looking at me like I have a crazy side, all right? So people were mad at me. I didn't bring that up, okay? I let that go. I tried to forget about it. This is a consistent thing in my life, is that I would try to let things go and act like it didn't happen, because I also knew that it won't happen again. I always have it in my head that I can physically fight. Now, the thing with that scenario was that, some people were irritated with me for a while just because I got us all kicked out and we couldn't hang out at the hotel anymore, which that's supposed to be the big deal. But I didn't say anything and I let it go. Now, years later, I go to a duty station and I'm talking to them there. He had been at that duty station before me because he graduated earlier and I went to Guam. He went to California. So by the time I got to California, he was gone. Now they were talking about him. Okay. The supervisor told me a story that she actually had to tell him, to counsel him, because of body odor. Now, the reason I'm saying that is because when I heard that, like I said, it all depends on your personality type, whether you're an empathic person or you're a hardcore person, whatever, that also comes into play with how much trouble you want to cause when somebody does something to you, okay? How do you think I felt when she was telling me that? I didn't tell her that he did anything to me. I just said, yeah, I remember him from A school. Don't know him very well, but yeah. When she's telling me this story and saying, oh my gosh, yes, people were complaining so much, I had to actually go to him and tell him he needs to take a shower. He needs to start showering. I felt bad for him because immediately, and I know this now, as my empathic nature was looking into that and understanding that he grew up a certain way. He's got some issues. He was this quiet, low-tone person. He did that to me. And then he has hygiene issues. Now, in my mind, like I said, I felt sorry for him. I let him off the hook. Do you know I have him on my Facebook page to this day? Now, if all of a sudden he did something and I said, wait a minute, I've got a story to tell. Don't think I wouldn't. Here's where people don't understand as well. If I know that somebody's capable of something, but I let it go, if it becomes a problem or chronic situation and somebody's complaining about it and I have backup information and it's many years later, I'm probably going to do the same thing as a lot of other women do, and I'm going to stand up and say, it happened to me too. There is a difference. No, it doesn't mean that in that moment, if you choose not to say something, it's because in your mind, or in my mind, it was a fleeting thing. I tried to take my responsibility for as much of it as I could, and I tried to let it go. I didn't want the peer pressure. I didn't want to make a big deal. But When you find out it's a chronic situation and somebody could really cause damage, then sometimes you step up to the plate later because it's a bigger deal than you think. Okay, I have an example of that as well. Shocker. Now, like I said, he's on my Facebook page, and when all this was going down, just randomly out of nowhere, I decided to visit his Facebook page. Okay, I act like I don't even remember. We don't really communicate a whole lot, but like I said, in my mind, I feel bad for him. I feel bad for this person. But he had one thing after another on the Facebook page, basically about the judge. He is so strictly and strongly for the judge, but it was before they even had the hearing. What that tells me is he made a decision beforehand, right off the bat, and he's putting it out there one thing after another, cutting down the accuser. Now, like I said, I don't know who's right, who's wrong. That's not a part of it. But it made me sick to my stomach when I saw his page, because immediately I reflected back to him and what happened in my mind. And I didn't control this. It came into my mind and gave me a stomachache practically. This disgusting thing as I'm looking at somebody who basically is okay with women being treated that way, because I know that he had those tendencies because he was that way with me, and I passed it off as he was drunk or I felt bad for him, whatever, and he didn't get anywhere with me, to he is so strongly supporting this person who's being accused of a horrible crime before anyone could actually even hear the words coming out of the guy's mouth before the hearings. In that moment, it triggered something in me. It triggered disgust for him all over again, even though I didn't think that was a big deal. It was just a small snippet once again in my mind, like I talk about. Your mind being a computer. And these little fragments over time of different scenarios, and every once in a while you have to defrag. Well, I realized, and I've described it like that before, all these little snippets, they're little fragments inside. And sometimes I don't really think anything's a big deal, and you get triggered and you start looking at it as a much bigger deal. Okay? Are you understanding now how things affect different people in different ways, and you can't determine what's right or wrong? Okay, now the next scenario. Shocker. This is our graduation hotel party. We all graduated from A school. There were like 3 different classes, whatever. We had a hotel party. Now, there's actually instructors who are sleeping with a couple of the students. Okay? So I'm getting that in mind. This was culture shock for me, because to me, I was always like, I can't, picture that's wrong. That's so ethically wrong and everything else. These instructors were at this party. But at this party, we were all drinking, okay? And keep in mind, I'm drinking with these different people in A school, but it's new to me, okay? So obviously I don't know what I'm doing, and I end up drinking and feeling horrible, or, it affects me. I'm still a lightweight now, but so I'm drinking. We all end up staying at the hotel. That was no big deal. That was planned anyway. Is that, there were a couple of beds, different people were sleeping. We just crashed basically on the floor. No big deal. It wasn't like, wasn't making out with anyone, anything like that. But I'm laying there with a big group of people. We're all just laying on the floor. And I remember waking up, and the guy behind me had his hand on my shirt. Now, that disgusted me. I did not picture this guy in that way at all. Okay, what do you think that I would do? Right now, do you think that I would just let that go? Okay. Many years later, yes, I wouldn't let that happen. However, then I just pretended that I stayed asleep and didn't know what was going on because I was embarrassed. I was embarrassed even though I wasn't doing anything. I was embarrassed to bring it up. I didn't want to embarrass him. I didn't want to even act like I knew he did it. Okay, so I over time, stirred in my sleep. And when I did that, my so-called sleep, and when I did that, he pulled his hand out of my shirt. But that's been a fragment in my mind for a long time. I have him on my Facebook page because I chose to act like it never happened. It turned my stomach. He was a friend of mine, and I never looked at him in that way. And I felt taken advantage of. I felt like being treated like just a piece of meat, basically, objectified. I didn't ask for it. I didn't flirt. There was absolutely nothing leading anyone to believe that I was okay with that. But yet I still tried to act like it just didn't happen. Okay. Next scenario. Well, I'm going to bypass the scenario that I told you about with the narcissist that I ended up actually losing my virginity to before I was ready, by being manipulated, and I was treated. He played a lot of head games with me. Ultimately, I ended up snapping and punched him in the face. But there's so much to that story. There's way too much to that story to understand the mindset, because the thing with this is you can be the most stable person, the most moralistic person in the world, and these scenarios happen over time that mess with you, and it builds up inside, and that's my point. You never know the point where somebody's going to finally fight back. You never know what can happen. All of a sudden, that's going to trigger you to say, no, that's it. And that's why I'm building up, because I'm going to show you that point with me. But there are some people who, they let things go when they are a teenager because they're not to that point. Okay, there's so many factors. Peer pressure and guilt and questioning yourself and not really understanding what happened, or not believing what happened, or trying to pretend it didn't happen. Okay, there's so many factors. Understand that. So many factors, so you can't determine that. The next scenario, or one of the next scenarios, was now I moved on to Guam, my first duty station. I was at a party. Okay, I'm a little more in control of myself. I'm on my own, everything else. I go to this party. I'm actually at this party with my boyfriend. Okay, I started seeing the CB when I got there. And I'm walking down the hallway behind my supervisor. Okay, I'm young. I'm only 19 years old. I'm in my first crew, and my supervisor's there, and we were all like a family. We used to hang out, our whole crew. That's what we did when we were in the military. That's why that military frame of mind. We spent the holidays together. We were family, okay? Now I'm walking down the hallway, and I talked about this in my Me Too show as well. And he didn't even turn around. He reached back, and he grabbed me in the crotch. Now, it wasn't an accident, because I'd said something before, and, you know, a friend of mine was trying to do what I do and look at things from a different perspective. I would have done the same thing. Do you think maybe that was an accident? Like he was reaching back and it was, didn't realize it. And I'm like, no, it was pretty targeted. You know when it is and when it isn't. And I don't exaggerate on that kind of stuff. Okay, what would happen right now if I had a scenario like that? Are you kidding me? I dare anyone to try that now. You will regret it. That's who I've become, because of a buildup of situations and a maturity and empowerment. I'm an empowered woman now, okay? I have confidence in myself now. I will stand up to myself now, or for myself. I set the bar a little higher because I realize you have to set your standards and not allow people to cross those boundaries, those barriers, whatever. Back then, I wasn't prepared for it. It made no sense. I couldn't calculate in my head why, with our situation, him being my team leader, me being a 19-year-old kid, him being so much older than me on top of it, married, everything else, it took me forever. It didn't make sense in my head that he would do that. So I never truly really got it in my head why he would do that. It's never made sense to me. It does now as I'm older, okay, and I've had so many situations. But back then, I froze. My whole mind froze. I never even told my boyfriend that it happened. I didn't go out there saying, do you know what just happened, blah, blah, blah. I pretended that I didn't notice. I pretended that it didn't happen, because I figured if I act like it didn't happen, then it didn't happen. I don't have to face it. I don't have to deal with it. Guess what, folks? That is a reaction of a lot of women, because we know what the aftermath is, or we're scared of what it could be. Or a lot of times they're people who we're friends with and we feel almost bad calling them on something. We'd rather just act like we didn't realize it and continue being the best of friends because they never did anything toward me. And then if I act like it didn't happen, then they'll act like it didn't happen and they'll never do it again. And we don't have to deal with what happened. That is reality, folks. Okay? 19-year-old kid. Okay, so after that happened, let me tell you, the same person, a couple of years later, I wasn't in his crew anymore, but a couple of years later, I'm sitting at Barney's Beach House, which was a very known place at Guam. Everyone went there. We're outside and we're all sitting at a table and he's there. My female friend was there as well. And she's a little more boisterous than I am. Okay. He reached over, he was joking around with her, and he reached over and he grabbed her thigh, like very inappropriately. She reacted. She didn't freeze. She reacted and she got mad. He grabbed her harder. He got aggressive because he got mad that she stood up to him. Ultimately, we found out he ended up getting a divorce. He had an alcohol problem and an aggressive problem. I think he had to go to counseling. He was a mess. Okay, now maybe I could have stopped that by saying something initially, but in all actuality, he didn't do enough for it. Where would it have gone? In my mind, it's like, what am I supposed to do? He's a first class. I was like an E3 or an E2. Actually, I think I was an E1. I first got there. Okay. Part of that was, even if I would have gotten mad enough and actually processed it and brought it to the attention of management, it's his word against mine. Okay. They're going to take into account that he is a first class petty officer. All of that applies. Okay, all of that applies to the mindset of a young female going through these scenarios. But keep in mind as well, that's one more scenario that's built up inside. Okay, the next scenario, guess what? Same place, different crew leader, my section leader, my supervisor. Friends with him, I'm friends with his whole family. I'm friends with his wife, okay? They all know me that I am harmless. I am the one single female they never had to worry about. The wives always knew they never had to worry about. I was like mother hen anyway. I actually had a CB friend of mine. Her husband used to say, you're the only one I want her going out with, like when he would deploy, because he trusted me. He knew that I wouldn't take her out and try to get her to pick up men and all that, because I didn't. Okay, so I'm friends with him and I trust him. I'm friends with his wife. I'm friends with his daughter. Now, I'm going to give you the whole scenario with this one. We have what's called an air traffic control symposium. I just get to Guam. I'm still 19 years old. It's only a few months after I've been there. And, excuse me, this air traffic control symposium is in New Orleans. Now, what happens is they offer it to some people. Would you like to go to the air traffic control symposium, which is like any other symposium? It is full of lectures and all this kind of stuff, but they'll send you there free. Now, I'm in Guam, which is 12,000 miles away from Ohio. If I go to this air traffic control symposium for a few days, New Orleans is only a few hour flight to Ohio versus 24 hours of a flight from Guam for me to take leave. I would have had to take a lot more leave if I wanted to go home flying from Guam, and it would have cost me a lot more money. Here I have a free flight that's already made. It's they schedule it for me. I don't have to take leave because I'm doing a temporary duty. I'm temporarily on duty. I get all the way from Guam to New Orleans. And then after the symposium, which is actually a big deal, I can fly to Ohio, and I only needed to take leave for that portion. So yes, I wanted to go to the air traffic control symposium. I was still so naive and such an innocent person that the symposium itself was just based on sex. I was floored when a chief who I remembered from A school cornered me in a pool. And I realized, whoa, this is what it's about. Now, I wasn't ready for all that. Okay, I still wasn't ready for all that. And I ended up hanging out with a first class. I think he was a first class by the time we went there. Who was very, very, very religious, very dedicated to his wife. I trusted him completely. He didn't want to be a part of any of this as well. So he and I would end up going and getting food, going back up to the room, because we did. We all stayed in the same room. Now, maybe that makes me naive. It does. But I'm looking at it like, okay, that's a first class, and that's my my section leader. They're going to protect me, okay? They're going to be professional and everything else. Now, that trip was very professional as far as the living arrangements. I didn't sleep in the same bed as anybody. I got my own. But just the idea of staying in a hotel room, that wouldn't happen now. That wouldn't, because it'd be inappropriate. Back then, I was full of trust and thought, oh, it's no big deal. I don't want to be the one making it a big deal. Now, So he and I actually ended up staying up in the room eating and just chatting, and it was fine. And I'm glad he was there because I felt more protected and I felt more validated by not going to the parties and all that because I was uncomfortable. People were constantly hitting on me because I was the young girl, and that's what this air traffic control symposium was all about. Talk about, bringing me into the world there. Okay, so let's skip forward skip back a little bit. Before we ever left, my crew leader actually asked me, he's like, hey, do you want to stop beforehand? We'll stay in Vegas for a couple of days since we're there. I had never been to Vegas. He said, I'll go ahead. I'll get the room, 2 beds, everything else. If you want to come with me before we go there, because I'm going to stop there. Otherwise, I would have been on a separate flight and I would have just gone straight to New Orleans. So I decided, yeah, I'll do that. It's all paid for. I trust him. It's not a big deal. So I go there. I'm in Vegas. I come back to the room early. I'm sleeping. He comes back to the room. He comes over and he tries to kiss me. Now I'm mortified and I was shocked. I'm like, this guy, I'm friends with him. I'm friends with his family. I'm friends with his wife. I lectured him. I'm like, what are you doing? I'm friends with your family. Like, what are you doing? Well, now he pulled back and he apologized and gave me some whatever excuse. Okay. Now I forgave him. I let it go. I tried to drop it out of my mind. I went on to Ohio. He went back to Guam. By the time I got back to Guam, I was kicked out of the crew. Okay. Now, I had a friend who actually was from the same town I came from. Okay, so we bonded and we would chat. And he told me, and it was a short time later, it wasn't right after I came back. It was probably a few months later. He's like, Mel, he told me that you're like, I'll never forget this statement, that you're like a Dorito. And I'm like, a Dorito? What does that mean? Because I was confiding in him suddenly, and I didn't want to. I didn't say anything to anyone. Once again, I tried to act like it didn't happen because I didn't want to have issues. I didn't want to bring that up. I was friends with his family. I didn't want it turning on me. I just wanted it to go away. I wanted the scenario to go away. Was I assaulted? No. Was I, pressured? Well, I was a little pressured, but me being me, like I said, I gave him a lecture and he realized, whoa, she's not going to give into this. However, being treated like that here's the point before I continue with my friend that I, went to this, or we were from the same city. My point is in some of this, and I want to make sure to bring this up, when it comes to men, I'm going to talk for myself, but I believe that a lot of women are like this. We want to trust. If we feel like we can trust you, we can let our guard down. I know with me to this day, I've realized that that's such a huge deal to me when it comes to dating. I've realized that that's part of my selection process. That's part of the reason why I don't just go for anyone. Because unless you show me that you respect me and actually care about me and are protective of my emotions, you would be protective of my reputation, you would be protective of me, my guard has to stay up because somebody's got to protect me. The right man who comes along, my guard can come down because I'll let him do what men are supposed to do, protect. Okay? Now, when I'm going into this room with this guy who I'm friends with and he's my section leader, or I'm walking down the hall with this other section leader who I'm friends with and hanging out with, and I'm at this party with people I graduated with and I'm friends with, when they violate that or they try to manipulate me or pressure me into doing something that's wrong, and it is. The one was married. The one, just grabbed me without my consent. The other one put his hand down my shirt without my consent, nothing. That immediately puts up that barrier because I realize, oh my gosh, I trusted these men. I can't trust them. That in itself, just to let you know, that in itself has a huge effect on someone like me. And it has a huge effect on a lot of women. That's why we become defensive, because we realize we can't put our guard down. If people we trust over time, suddenly we can't trust them, our guard is constantly up. Why do you think that we get triggered so easily and our guard goes up? It's because we have been conditioned to not trust, because anytime we do, we are victimized or made very vulnerable. Okay, so know that. Now, when I'm told this, going back to my friend who I went to the same, we grew up in the same place, Youngstown. He's like, Mel, he said that you're like a Dorito. I'm like, what does that mean? He said, he told him, Melanie's like a Dorito. I can't, how did he say it? Because I was like, I can't believe that was even said. I was too tempting for him to keep in the crew, so he had to move me out of the crew. So here's a married man. I'm friends with his family. I trust him. I feel like I'm friends with him as well. And because I didn't give in, and I still did what I felt was appropriate, I didn't slam him. I talked to him and tried to reason. I thought I was reasoning with him to make him understand why, no, this can't happen. And what are you doing to your wife? I love her. And all this, I tried to handle it the best way I could. I was reprimanded basically by being kicked out of my crew that I loved, and it was very difficult for me. And it was definitely determined it was because he had no control over himself. I was punished. He had no control over himself. Ladies and gentlemen, that right there is sexual harassment. Do you think I ever said anything? No. I wanted it to go away once again. I didn't want to have issues with his family because I'd have to explain that to somebody. We all hung out together. Our, air traffic control, we're on an island. We all hung out together. Do you think I wanted to be the one saying I'm not going to hang out with him because he did this and raise that? No. Once again, peer pressure and everything else is why I didn't. He went on and he, I believe he had affairs, everything else. His daughter had affairs. Like, that's what she was learning over time. Okay, that's what happens with all that. Okay, so start understanding the mindset and what causes these kind of things. Next scenario. My friend in Guam actually claimed and filed a complaint that she was raped by this guy that she was friends with, that she always hung out with. She said he was a basketball player. Other people knew him. I knew who he was, but I don't think I ever knew him personally. Now, instantly, all of our peers, because she started acting different, she started acting defensive over a period of time, she changed her personality. So because she had changed in her personality, when she finally came out and said that this happened, people immediately said, she's lying. Look at how she's acting. Okay, guilty people act like that. She can't be telling the truth. And this guy's, nice guy and blah, blah, blah. I went along with it. I would never say that to her. I never tried to bully her. I would never do that. But I believed everybody because I felt like, well, everyone's saying that she's lied about it. They must know something I don't know. I, to this day, feel bad about that. Here's a woman who was claiming, who was strong enough to actually bring it up, who was strong enough to actually file a complaint about it, and everybody immediately made a determination that she was lying. I look at it now and think no wonder her personality changed over that period of time before she brought it up. She was affected by it. It ate at her to the point where she couldn't hold it in anymore and had to make that complaint. Okay? But what did we do? We turned on her, including myself. I didn't turn on her by saying anything. I didn't do anything, but I didn't believe her. Okay, I'm ashamed of myself for that. I've learned over time, based on my own reactions, when people want to say I'm ultra defensive and I have no reason to be, they have no idea. That's why I'm listing these reasons, to make people understand, yes, I do have reasons. And sometimes it takes you to a boiling point before you're going to turn around and finally say that's it. And that's why sometimes it could be the smallest little scenario and you're going, whoa, wait a minute, are you overreacting? Well, let me give you all of the scenarios to make you understand why suddenly I've had enough and why I won't put up with it anymore. Are you understanding now why you cannot decide for other people what they should or shouldn't do in scenarios like this? Okay? All right. Now, anyway, the next one. I've got to hurry through this because I have so many more points to make. This isn't all about women being sexually harassed. This is also going to be my opinion based on experience of men who are falsely accused, because that hits me hard too. Okay, the next scenario really quickly. When I was in Guam as well, one of my temporary duty assignments was to be a brig escort. I was supposed to escort the people who were in the brig. They were in there for low crimes, very small crimes. They're basically under suspension. And I was supposed to escort them around the island to do different work around the island. Okay, we would clean up this or that. I was supposed to watch over them. Basically, I was a guard. Now, I actually became pretty good friends with these guys. They respected me. The reason I became a friend with them is because I demanded respect, and they gave me respect, and I showed them respect. Okay, I had that to me all my life with guys. That's the thing, and that's where I had a hard time when I had to finally start realizing that guys were treating me this way, because I was used to being one of the guys as far as I always got respect from different guys I worked with, whether I was working with the police, because there was a while, the CBs, and all that. They would become like my brothers. They would be protective over me. That's where I got all my life. I had these friends, and then at some point it changed. I crave that again. I crave those guys around me, whether they're friends, whether I develop a relationship. I crave that feeling of being protected, somebody who would protect me in one way or another. But I have to fend for myself, like a lot of women do when we realize that we can't count on that. Okay. So anyway, I'm this Berg escort, and I'm getting along really well with these guys. I respect them. They respect me. They come and they tell me, and I believe them. Okay. And I do truly believe them, because I can also reflect back on the attitude of the guys who worked in the jail when I would go and report to duty. That these guys were running around trying to start rumors that I was out there having group sex with these prisoners. Okay, how horrible. Think about that. I'm in a professional capacity, and I am acting very professional. I have the respect of the people I'm working with, basically, okay? And the people who actually work at the jail were trying to get this information from these guys. They were saying derogatory things about me. They were saying sexual things about me. And I heard it from them, and I know that they were honest about it. We had become close friends to where I knew they were honest about it. How do you think that affected me? Okay, I could have turned around and made a complaint about that, all right? And I could have brought that up. I let it go, but it stuck with me. It stuck with me because I couldn't believe it. I'm like, why would they do that to me? I've given them absolutely no reason to say something like that. How angry do you think that made me, knowing that I worked very hard? I worked just as hard as these guys. I never pawned anything off on men. In my life, I've never pawned anything off on men going, okay, I'm the girly girl, you do this for me, blah, blah, blah. And I was known for that, as a matter of fact, of holding up my end of everything. And yet I have these guys who don't even know me automatically, because I'm a female and I'm around them, trying to say sexual things about me, to where the guys I was working with, the prisoners, actually came to my defense and told them they need to shut up, because they were able to talk to him that way. I knew that they were telling me the truth when they were telling me that. All I ever did was hold on to that. Hold on to that anger and say, I can't wait till I'm out of here. And then my temporary duty was gone, and I never had to see them again. But guess what? That's another fragment that's inside. Okay? Another buildup. All right? Did I say anything at the time? No. Did I get anybody in trouble? No. Would you make that decision, all you people out there who are determining what women should do in any case scenario, and what they would do if they were telling the truth? Would you have done something? Oh, of course. I'm sure you would have, because you know exactly what it's like. No, that's what I'm saying. You don't know what it's like. Me, the personality type I am, the very strong woman who I am, I didn't do anything. I just wanted it to go away. But it's one more scenario in my little arsenal of scenarios in my head building up. Okay? Now, the next situation, I get to my next duty station in California. No, I'm sorry. This is actually still in Guam. I have this gate guard. He's actually a police officer. He wasn't a military. He was a local in Guam, and he was a police officer on base. Now, he would stop me at all hours, because the clubs were open till 4, and a lot of times I would come in the back gate, it was dark back there, at 4 o'clock in the morning or whatever. I would come on base, and he would stop me. It was very uncomfortable. He started following me. He followed me one time and parked behind me and kind of trapped my car back there. And then he kept asking me where I had been. And he started telling me, well, I know you have day shifts this week. Now that makes me very uncomfortable. Okay. I don't know how much information these police officers have on base. Okay. He got so bad to the point where I was friends with the police officers. They were just my friends. But guess what? Here's a shocker. I didn't want to get anybody in trouble. I wanted to make sure I wasn't making a big deal out of anything. But I did confide in my friend. I was like, oh my gosh, that guy, he just makes me so uncomfortable. He keeps stopping me. I'm like, I hate it. Now, I was also friends with the chief, but I did not want it brought up officially. And my friend was telling me, he's like, Mel, can I talk to the chief about this? I said, I don't want to get anybody in trouble. He says, I just want to talk to him about this for reasons. He went and he talked to the chief. Next thing you know, they asked me to come in and they asked me to fill out an actual statement. I said, I really don't want to get anybody in trouble. They said, Mel, what you don't understand is that there is a young female military police officer who has to work with him because they worked in shifts of 2. And she's been complaining that he's been harassing her like crazy. And you're her backup. So I told them, I said, okay, all I can tell you is my experience. And I told them my experience. I said, yes, it made me uncomfortable. He's never touched me, anything like that. But yes, it's made me uncomfortable. She came up after and gave me a big hug. I have never talked to her before. She was very low tone and quiet. She gave me a hug and she started crying. And she's like, thank you so much. She says, I didn't have anybody. Okay. She says, thank you so much for backing me up because I didn't have anybody. I didn't have any witnesses. And because you did that, at least they're going to separate us. Okay. Now, come to find out years later, I end up at my next duty station. They get a hold of me again. I have to sign. They asked me if I would sign an official statement based on anything I can think of, because this guy apparently continued to do that to many women, and he did it to the wrong woman. Guess what? He did it to a woman that's probably in the same frame of mind as I am now. He tried to pull this captain's wife, an 07's wife, and he would try to harass her, and she's like, that's not happening. And she brought that up. That's what I would do now. But did I do that back then? No. I didn't want to be the only person. I didn't want to be filing a complaint. I didn't know, how I would be reprimanded. I didn't know if he would turn. I wanted it to go away. I wanted to make sure I wasn't overreacting. Are you seeing the progression? Are you understanding why things aren't always cut and dry? That's my main point here. Next scenario. Okay. And by the way, I'm very sensitive now. After 17 years at my present job, we have people that work the gate. And of course, after all these years, they recognize us. Okay. I've had a couple of times different security officers try to be friendly and say, where have you been? I haven't seen you for a while. You working nights? As soon as they ask me what I'm working, or as soon as they say my name, I shut up, because in my mind, I'm going, don't be tracking me. Don't you track me. Or I don't know what information they have when they're scanning my card to get on base. I don't know how much information. So when they say my name, I'm like, did he look at that on my card? Is he looking me up? They know that I work in they'll tell me, something about air traffic or whatever. And it's like, why do they even know where I work? They shouldn't even know that. It's not like I sit here talking to him, telling him all that. That has a stigma to me to this point where I don't trust. Okay. This stuff builds up over time. All right. The next scenario. I had this friend. I was good friends with this person when I went to my next when I became a Department of Defense civilian. I'm no longer in the military. I became a civilian. Now, civilian comes with higher ranking. Okay, I went from a little lower ranking to a lot higher ranking, and I would think that becoming a civilian, this was a shocker to me. I always assumed that military women's probably going to be treated worse because, it's a man's world in the military, whatever. Do you know that I really didn't feel the extent of sexism until I became a civilian? I was really surprised about that. That really surprised me. I was higher ranking and I was a civilian like a lot of other women, when I was more a minority in the Navy, which a lot of people could have been, irritated, women in the military, whatever. But I really felt the attitude by contractors and everything else, and a demeaning attitude and looking past me toward, the guy in the room or whatever, when I became a civilian. And that was shocking to me, and that made me very angry as well. Another scenario that will build up inside that treatment. Okay. Now, when I became a civilian, I was friends with the pilots. I worked down in base operations, and I was friends with the pilots on base. Friends, never dated them, didn't sleep with anyone, nothing like that. But I would hang out with this one female and in her squadron. They always treated me with respect. Okay. I treated them with respect. They didn't try crossing lines, anything like that. But there was this one Italian pilot. I've talked about this one with the U2 thing as well. This Italian pilot, and he used to always give me a massage. Now, he did it in front of his other pilots and stuff who, like I said, I almost felt like they could be brotherly toward me. They would be protective. I felt that. I've grown up for a long time. This is the first time in my life, really, over the last many years, where I don't feel like I have those male supporting figures. Okay, where I feel like I really do have to just fend for myself. But before that, I've always had a group of guys who I knew, and I gained their respect, and they had my respect, and they were those guys. Okay, when I worked there, these pilots were those guys. So this one pilot, he would massage my shoulders. It was no big deal as long as we were in front of everybody. He was married. I had no interest in doing anything with him. He was married. And one day out of nowhere, my friend, it was kind of ironic, she was actually getting off a flight. So she was turning in her bags to me because I was working on the other end of the counter. So we were catching up. And as she was leaving, he came in. So she actually could have been a witness. She saw him come in and she was even like, well, that was weird. Like, what was he doing there? He showed up on my night shift, a mid shift. Okay. I was by myself and he showed up. He had just been out dinner and drinks. He was drunk. I can smell nothing but garlic and liquor on his breath. So being my friend and not wanting to make a big deal about anything, I just went along with it and was kind of joking around with him, whatever. Not joking in any kind of alluring way, but I tried to just act like we always do, even though it was very uncomfortable because suddenly it was just the two of us. And I did not understand why he came in to see me on a night shift when I was by myself. That never happened before. Because he wasn't flying. So it's like, why are you coming in here to visit me? He came behind the counter and he stood behind me and he started giving me a massage again. Like I said, it's suddenly very uncomfortable because it's out of our element. Eventually, he put his hands down my shirt. Okay, what would you think I would do, knowing who I am? You know what? This is a question. I'm gonna off track really quickly because this is what I meant to tell you. My mom knows me. The woman's known me since I was a baby, okay? And when the Me Too movement started and when all of these actors started coming forward, I remember being home and she was like, I don't understand why all of a sudden everyone's bringing stuff up, saying that this or that happened. Okay, and I understand, and I'll give her, the respect that to some people it doesn't make sense. So I said this in a way that she wouldn't know which direction I was going with it. I just nonchalantly, I was like, well, you know me. You've known me for a long time. You've known me all my life. I said, if anything like that ever happened to me, how do you think I would react? Do you think I would put up with that? And I said it like that because she knows, like, I won't put up with anything. I said, do you think I would put up with that? And she's like, oh God, no, you never. I said, you want me to list the number of scenarios that I've had over a lifetime where I never said a word? And she stopped and just looked at me. And I started telling her some of these scenarios and she was shocked. I said, but what you have to understand, I said, and you know who I am. You know I won't put up with anything. I said, but I froze. You don't know. And I said, like these women, I'm not saying all of them are telling the truth, but you have to understand that people respond differently. I said, you know me. From the time I was a kid, I could physically defend myself. I used to wrestle around with the boys and win, total tomboy. I said, but you never know how it's going to, there's so many factors and you never know how you're actually going to respond when something happens. I think I opened her eyes, which is what I'm trying to do with everybody here. I think I opened her eyes to that because she was shocked. So going back, this is one of the stories I told her. I said, this person I knew, I was very uncomfortable. I'm by myself. Was I scared? No, that's the thing. In this case, I can even understand where women are afraid. I get it. In my particular case, I am not afraid of men because I don't get scared. I get mad. And I know that if I get mad enough to snap, ouch. Okay, so I have that confidence and I have always had that confidence. There's very few scenarios that's ever happened where I got scared in the moment. Okay. Now, when he had his hands down my shirt, I froze because I could not believe that happened. It was awkward. I didn't know what to say. I had all of these things come into my head, and at the same time, it's like they say, you lift out of your body practically, and it's like you're detaching yourself from the scenario because it's so uncomfortable and you don't want to deal with it. That is what happens. Okay. Now, after, I don't even know how long, okay, I kind of pulled away in a very nice way, okay? I didn't react in a bad way and kind of let him know, hey, whatever. And he stopped. I acted like it never happened. I steered clear of him. I didn't want to be around him, but I never brought it up. Okay. He has a wife. I could have, brought it up to her. I could have brought it up to anybody. I'm working in base operations as a civilian. He's a pilot. That's, coming in on a night shift like that and, invading my space like that. That was a big deal. Did I say anything? No. I'm telling you now though. Okay. The next scenario, this is the bad one. I say bad because I'm realizing over time, as much as I tried to put this out of my mind, and as much as I tried to justify it in a one way by taking as much responsibility as I could, because I will still try to take responsibility for my situations as much as I can. It takes the burden off of me to take responsibility. Now, I'm telling you this, there's only 2 other people I remember telling this story to, and I told them in detail. I will not do that on here. They were both people I work with. One of those people, when they were done, when I was done telling them this story and my mixed emotions about how much I actually added to it, he said, Mel, you realize that's rape, don't you? Now, that's a strong statement because that's something I've never been able to actually turn around and say. I still can't. I know in a court of law, with the details I'm about to give you, which is, like I said, I'm going to open myself up like a wound because I feel that this is very important for me now that I've acknowledged how much has really affected me. I want rid of it. I don't want these people having that power over me. I don't want these scenarios having that power over me. I don't want them affecting possible future relationships. I can meet somebody tomorrow and I don't want my guard going up because they say something that immediately triggers something that makes me feel like I have to protect myself. Okay, or makes me immediately feel like they're not respectful, and that makes me so angry where I can't handle it. Okay, so I am running out of time. I'm going to go through this quickly. There's 2 more scenarios I'm going to tell you about. The next scenario is the one I think that I'm realizing has affected me the most. It was the latest one before the second scenario. The second scenario that happened, I'm going to be very brief about that one, but that's the one where I finally started healing a little bit because for the first time I stood up for myself. After all these years, me being the bold woman I've always been, a very, very empowered woman at this point in life, but a very strong woman all of my life, going through all these phases, all of those scenarios, and there are more. Okay, they're not horrible scenarios, but there are more little small tidbits that build up until the last scenario I tell you. The last scenario is the first one I really stood up for myself. Okay. Now, this one is painful, so, bear with me if I hesitate for a moment at times. I went to this bar. This is years ago. This with people who I work with. We were kind of hanging out, and they would go to this bar. Now, this bar is just a bad news kind of place. Okay, I've learned over time, it's not my element, but I tried to fit in. Okay, what does that say? Even in my 30s, I was in my 30s, I was given into peer pressure because I didn't want to be this, this goody two-shoes that, couldn't be around, the bad boys without, feeling uncomfortable. I like feeling comfortable around anybody. So I was trying to adapt. I would go there. It wasn't my element, but I would still be friends with everybody. I would hang out there, everything else. Deep inside, I knew that's not me. It's not who I am. Okay. Now, I went there one time, and I was by myself. I went there, and I would play pool. They also served really great food. And I met this person who was friends with, there's a lot of people from Chicago, I will say that. They were all from Chicago. They would come down here. And they were affiliated basically down here as well. So this one guy, I met him. The time I met him, I was by myself, and there was a guy that was hitting on me. And this guy, for a couple of hours, he acted like he was my boyfriend just to get this guy to leave me alone. Okay. What that did was I was very much attracted to him, very much. Okay. And him acting like my boyfriend kind of triggered this chivalry thing inside. It felt like he was being chivalrous. It felt like he was being protective. All the things that I've realized over time I truly do crave, I can't accept. It's only going to take that certain person who truly makes me believe that he is sincerely like that for me to actually allow him to be that way. It's going to take that guy who proves that he really wants to be my protector in so many ways where I will drop my defenses and allow him to do that. Okay? In this case, I felt like I was so attracted to him. He stirred up something in me with the protective thing. I really liked him. Okay? So I had his phone number. He had mine. He was coming into town a different time. When he came into town, I had an injury. Okay? My neck had been injured a while back in the Navy, and it's been messed up my whole life, or ever since, for 20 some years now. Now, I used to get really bad headaches. I still do. The headaches that I got back then were so chronic, though, I would take painkillers. I was given painkillers and muscle relaxers from the doctor back in the day when I would take them. I don't take those now. However, this night, I was going to meet up with my coworkers who were friends with these Chicago guys, and I knew that he was coming into town, and I wanted to hang out with him. We had texted, so I thought, okay, he's interested in hanging out as well. I'm going to get to know him. Okay. And that was exciting for me. I took this painkiller because I didn't want to have a headache that was going to be sickening, because I used to get those, and I wanted to go out. So before I left work, I had to work a night shift, and before I left work, I took this painkiller. I knew I had to be careful drinking. I know that I'm not supposed to be doing this. I know this, but I thought, okay, I can handle this. So I get there, and I have a drink. Now, when I got there, this guy who I really, really, really wanted to see and hang out with and all that, he started treating me badly. He started ignoring me. He would come over every once in a while and just try to push my buttons a little bit, keep me involved, keep me pulled in. But then he'd walk away, and it was like almost like he was doing it on purpose, being a jerk. Now, I realized that, and the horrible thing about it is that if I was completely sober, if I was not intoxicated and didn't have painkillers in me and such, there's no way I'd put up with that. I don't care how good looking he was. I don't care how attracted to him I was. I would not have put up with that, because I do not tolerate being treated like that. However, in my state of mind, I kept thinking, maybe I'm overreacting. I don't want to overreact, because this maybe, whatever. Okay, so as time goes, I'm being distracted by my dog. I don't want to yell at him, but Rocky, stop. Anyway, so they started kind of, they were drinking, and they would buy me drinks, and they would actually, when I was like, I would tell them, okay, I got to be careful, I can't be drinking a whole lot or whatever. They would pressure me into drinking, and I felt like I was being pressured, but at the same time, I gave into it. These are all areas where I took responsibility, by the way. So these are all the areas that kept me thinking, wait a minute, you can't really say anything because you went along with it. Okay. Now, by the end of the night, yes, I was not in a good state. At the very end of the night is when he came over and he started hanging out with me. So I thought, okay, he was just busy, whatever. Now we're going to get to know each other. Okay, we got ready to leave because people I knew, I was friends with the people who worked there, a couple of people I actually worked with and such. We all went to one of their homes. Okay, we're going to continue the party. Now, when I walked outside, my truck was actually towed away. And especially in my state, he's the one that suddenly was acting chivalrous. Well, I see it for what it was now. I see it. He had to pull me back in because finally I had gotten to a point where I'm like, okay, the heck with this, whatever, and I stopped trying to hang out with him. The end of the night is when he started trying to hang out with me again, and it's because we were going to this house. So we go. He said, we'll take care of that tomorrow. I'll take you over there or whatever, and you can get your car back or your truck. So I rode with them, went back to this house. They had a party. Let me tell you, by the end of it, I was in the bathroom. I was throwing up a lot. I remember snippets of the night. Okay, like I said, this is my worst story. This is the first time I'm actually saying it, and I'm saying it to a lot of people. I was in and out basically of consciousness because I would go and lay down. I would throw up. My friend kept coming in there. My female friend who was friends with them had dated him at some point. She's like, Mel, I'm worried about you. So she was kind of helping me out. He knew that I was in there throwing up, never came over to help me, nothing. Even she was concerned and was like, he should be in there taking care of you because of the pretext of everything. So I would go and I'd lay down on the couch and basically pass out. And I would kind of wake up I would go in there thinking, okay, I'm fine again. And everyone was in there partying. Next thing you know, I'd go in and have to throw up. I remember snippets of the night. At the end of the night, some people left. Some of us were staying. There were plenty of rooms. We walked upstairs. He grabbed my hand and he walked up there, and they just set it up almost like we're together. All of a sudden, it was just like we're together. Like it was just known amongst everyone that I was going to sleep in the same bed as this guy. Okay. Now, so I went in there and I slept in the same bed as him. And things started happening. I went along with it. And here's the thing. Keep this in mind. I'm taking responsibility for my part of everything. The fact that, hey, technically I went along with it. Okay, I was attracted to this guy. I had drunk a lot. I was not in my right mind. I had allowed him to treat me badly, and I still kept trying to act like everything was okay. Part of that I realized later, because I'm like, I was totally out of character. I don't let guys, like, I'll get mad. The thing is, I'll get mad and have an issue if someone's going to just ignore me and treat me badly. But for whatever reason, I let him do that, and when he came over and would start being nice, I let him back in. Well, I started realizing that it wasn't just that I was intoxicated and such, that he was basically making a jerk out of me. And because I didn't want that to be reality, I kept acting like it wasn't happening and like he wasn't affecting me in that way. Because I figured he's distracting me. I figured if I went along with it, then it's not really happening. Come here. That it's not really happening. Okay. Now, that's a psychological thing. When you don't want to be treated a certain way and you act like you're not being treated a certain way. Come here and lay down right now. Come on, buddy. Lay down. Sorry about that. Okay, so keep in mind this is happening. It got a lot worse, okay? I basically ended up going along with everything because I felt at that point like I would be wrong if I didn't, okay? I felt like I would be wrong because I was attracted to him and he knew it, because I allowed him to be mean to me, and then I still went to this party with him because I got in his car. I felt like, okay, if I suddenly am like, no, I don't think so, then he's going to look at me like, wait a minute, okay? So because of that, I gave in. Now, I'm not going to give the details. I gave the details to my coworkers. It made me sick to say out loud, everything else. But then it got even to the point where I remember bits and pieces, because I don't remember everything as in the moment. I do remember the night, okay? But I remember a lot of it was in bits and pieces. And at some point, I remember walking in to a room where his friend was in there and basically had taken advantage of somebody else that worked for him, and that was shocking for me to see. And then this guy, who I initially thought was such the chivalrous guy and was excited to get to know, was pushing me toward this bed with people in there. There's people in this room, and the person in the bed, and the female who's completely out of it who works for him, who he just, messed with in front of everybody. And now this guy who I'm looking at initially as a chivalrous guy who I'm attracted to is pushing me toward the bed, trying to get me in there. I don't know, to do a live show. I don't know. That makes me sick to my stomach to think that I was treated like that, because that's not me. It makes me sicker to know that I allowed myself to be treated like that because I was trying to save face. That is the story that hurt the most in my life. Okay, that is one of the stories when it comes to sexual assault that hurt me the most in my life. I had another story that had to do with a boyfriend who I cared about very much, and it hurt me to my core, but I don't even have time to talk about that one. And that one I realized is one of those that affected me as well. Now, when the next day, his friends actually convinced him to take me, like he owed me, like, don't be a jerk, take her to get her car. He dropped me off at the towing place. Now, this is after his friends also told me all these other stories, because I think his friends really felt bad for me. They realized that I was a nice person. I had sat there and talked to them all night. They realized that I wasn't this trampy person that just went along with this kind of stuff, they knew him as well, and they knew he was just a bad seed. They can see the combination was a horrible combination, and they felt bad for me. So they at least convinced him to take me to pick up my truck. As he was driving away, dropped me off to pick up my truck, he yelled, "Sex, drugs, and rock and roll," and drove away. So he treated me so disrespectfully. And my only saving face at that moment and during the whole thing was to act like he wasn't doing it. To act to him like I didn't notice that he was being that way to me. Like I was cool and everything was fine. When deep inside, I was mortified, I was crushed, I was angry, I was confused, everything else. Now that's a horrible story. That affected me deeply, and I'm coming out and saying it so that I can get rid of it. Okay? Did I bring up, now in a court of law, that could be, and that's where the controversy comes in. When my coworker actually told me that, Mel, that's rape, I said, well, that's one of those scenarios where if that, in a court of law, not that I was ever considering taking him to the court of law, I said, those are those areas that are never clear. That's where the woman's on trial. I was drunk. I took painkillers. I didn't say no, all this. I said, that's a slippery slope, and I understand that. But I take responsibility for being irresponsible with myself. As a man, knowing, and he knew the situation. He knew that he was taking advantage of a situation. A real man would have been protective. Recently I put out the song, and I'm trying to remember the name of the artist. I can't remember. It's the country artist. And it's called Take a Drunk Girl Home. That affected me a lot because it showed the difference between a real man who would see somebody intoxicated, and a real man, as far as I'm concerned, are protective. They know that that's their role. I'm sorry, that's one of the roles basically from the beginning of time, is to be the protector. They see a drunk woman, instead of being an opportunist and taking advantage, even whatever irresponsibility she is showing. I'm talking about the man's part. She can be the most irresponsible person in the world for putting herself in that situation. But a true man, as far as I'm concerned, is going to be protective. They're not going to be opportunistic. This particular individual, I'm not going to say man because I don't look at him that way, was very opportunistic, and then on top of it tried to mortify me. That shows he had severe issues with women. The way he treated different women, and I heard about that, that to me is like a sociopath, a psychopath, whatever. That was a hard lesson for me to learn, and that affected me deeply for a long time, up until this moment where I'm going to try like crazy to let it go. Now, really quickly, in the next scenario, which was the last, I kind of mentioned this in the Me Too movement. I'm not going to go into great detail about this because this is a current person I know, and I have forgiven them, and I truly believe that they've changed in their attitude. They do not treat me like this. However, I did have a scenario. I am running out of time. I have a few more things to talk about. So I did have a scenario where a person I work with, over time, we were supposedly friends. We weren't that close of friends. We really didn't know each other that well, but I had known him before I got to my present, place of employment. Now, I started working as his assistant with different things. And over time, he started talking to me in a certain way that at first I would joke around with him because I felt like he was safe. Like, we're buddies. It's okay. Then it started changing, and it started becoming more dominant, and it started becoming more demeaning. He would either talk to me like I was a whore, or he would talk to me like I was a child, like an idiot. But he started showing me no respect, and that surprised me because I thought that he liked me as a person from our time when I knew him before I got here. Okay, so he changed the way he was referring to me. Now, what ended up happening over time is that he got to a point where he was very inappropriate, and he wouldn't stop. He started saying things to me one day, all hyped up, telling me he wanted to see what's under my jacket and all this. And when I was finally like, do you need to go home? He wouldn't stop. Okay, so do you think that I would have immediately reported him? You'd think, right? No. Guess what? I still didn't want to get him in trouble. And I acted like, if I act like I don't appreciate this, and if I just stop reacting to him, he'll understand and he'll stop. That was me being naive, because I've come to realize that once a man feels like they have you in a certain place and they've built up that communication to the point where they are just plain being disrespectful, who are you to suddenly pull the stop on it? Okay. Now, over time, what ended up happening was I lost my position, which was just an additional duty. It wasn't, any promotion or anything like that, but it was something that I truly enjoyed doing and I had goals. It was very, very blatant that it was because I stopped allowing him to talk to me that way and I stopped responding to him when he would say things. And I was trying to keep it nothing but professional. Now, there was more to it before all this happened that had happened. Now, the reason I'm not going to get into all that is because I'm running out of time, but also because that doesn't matter anymore. I finally got to a point where I said, that's enough. I'm not dealing with this anymore. Everything came back and I realized that, you know what? No. I have enough fight in me at this point, and I have enough ammunition. If I pull up the rage from the past, and the thing is, all of this stuff, it stays trapped as rage. If I ever got attacked, let me tell you, I would bring up all the rage that I have built up over time from being disrespected or treating a certain way because of this culture, this rape culture, which is what it is, okay? That I would hurt somebody. So what I ended up doing was I went at it the most professional way I could. I sought advice from Equal Opportunity Office. I did go to my supervisor. I went to my boss. They didn't think it was a big deal because they thought we're friends, we're just not getting along. But when they didn't handle it, I said it needs to be taken care of. Now, that went a lot further. I'm not going to go into all the details about that, of course, because it's water under the bridge. But the point with that story is that was the point. That right there, and this was many years ago now, but that was the point where I said enough. I will not deal with this anymore. And I made such a strong statement very directly, and I fought everybody, and I was unwilling to back down because I got into fight to the death mode, and I'm that way now. I will not accept any of that into my life at this point. So that part of it is better, to where I set my boundaries and I will stand by those boundaries. That was fixed. Like I said, being triggered by everything that's going on, by people's reactions saying what should and shouldn't happen when women go through issues, triggered me realizing that it's society right now that's triggering me, because I have never been able to really process all this stuff. And I've had so many different scenarios happen, and I've had different scenarios than that as well, but it's a buildup, and you can't tell me how to react. You can't tell me what's right and what's wrong. We are all affected by everything that happens in this world, and we're affected in different ways. So the more people put pressure on victims, and I'm talking victims of sexual assault, I'm talking victims of being wrongly accused. You cannot say how people should react, because of every scenario I told you about. Everything is a factor. Your background is a factor. Your character is a factor. Your age is a factor. Your scenario, your situation, your environment, your peers, everything is a factor. Not one person in this world can stand in somebody else's shoes and tell them how they should react to a situation that is devastating, especially if it has built up, especially if things are put in their mind that they should be a certain way. And it takes some people longer to realize that this is wrong. There are some women who get this impression because of how they were raised or scenarios that happen, that they feel like that's the way it should be. And it takes them a while to realize that they're being mistreated. Okay? Now, really quickly, like I said, I'm not going to tell this whole story because it's very personal to somebody I'm close to, and it's not my story to tell, other than the effect on me. I am not just irritated toward men about women in sexual assault. It is just as bad to me when I see all these blanket statements and these jokes and everything else put out there about somebody being accused of something, because you wrongly accuse, especially a man, of sexual assault. That is a huge deal. There's nothing funny about that. There's nothing entertaining about that. There is nothing right about that. If you're accusing somebody of sexual assault and it did not happen, the effects on a man are huge. Okay? Like I said, was tied very closely to someone who was accused of a violent crime, and on the sidelines, because it wasn't something that was actually brought up in charges, on the sidelines, I was told stories of sexual abuse. Now, the sexual abuse part and some of these situations that were brought up as far as the violence, I was there and I was witness and it didn't happen. And I know this for a fact. Okay. Now, that was a very difficult time in my life. That started off my life in a very difficult mode. Okay. That is very, very disheartening for me. Now, like I said, trying to make people understand how different scenarios affect people different ways. I told you about my scenarios as a woman because those are my scenarios. Those are what I can tell you. I can tell you the effects because those are mine. I can't tell you the scenarios with men because I'm not a man. However, I can tell you what I know from being a witness. And I actually was a witness on the stand, okay? And from being affected so deeply because that person was affected very deeply and permanently. Okay, my point is none of us know, I'm going to reiterate this as far as the political nonsense, but the situation that was brought up between the judge and the doctor. None of us know what truly happened. Please stop putting out jokes about sexual assault. Please stop putting out jokes or blanket statements about either one, about being falsely accused. Don't say all men are predators because you haven't dated all men. You haven't met all men. Don't say all women are liars or all women are users or all the stereotypes that people put out about women based on one or two of your own scenarios because it's unfair. Okay, that's one thing I was going to say as well. When people make statements like that, and they're derogatory toward women or men, and say that men are like this, women are like this, especially if they're talking about in relationships. Keep this in mind. You're 100% wrong, and here's why. Like, I'm going to say as far as women, you cannot say all women are opportunists or all women use men for money. Those are two of the big ones, okay? Because you haven't dated all women. Because you haven't dated me. All I have to do is throw that one factor in, and that makes you wrong. I can say that because I know I'm not that way, so I'm part of the women's society. You can't say all women are any way. And if you have dated me, then you definitely can't say that, okay? Not all men are predators because I can list so many men I know who are good men who are not predators. Stop letting that anger inside build to the point where you are so angry toward a whole sex of people, a whole race of people. This extends so far, okay? I have more to talk about. Honestly, I have more to talk about. And there's so much more I have to talk about that I wanted to bring up. I didn't want to focus so much. I didn't realize that my scenarios in this case were going to take that long. Now that I organized it, there's so many areas and so many examples I wanted to talk about to equal the playing field, I guess. So, to talk a lot as well about what men go through. If you want to hear my perspective on that, because I thought it was a great perspective and it stays the same, go back and listen to my Me Too show. You can find it on my YouTube channel, okay? Just look up Flip the Switch. Melanie L. Rogers Flip the Switch. It'll pull up the pink banner. I had a Me Too show and I was trying to show how all of this stuff is so... It's dividing all of us. We're being divided by now, and there's so many different sides when it comes to this. Women attacking women who can't understand, what it feels like to be assaulted. Men attacking women for the same reason. Men getting irritated and angry because women are assuming all men are predators. Therefore, men who are good are being punished because of men who are bad. Therefore, they're getting angry at women for treating them badly. Now they have issues with women. Now women have more issues because they're being treated badly by the good guys on top of it because they've had enough. It's just an ongoing circle. I'm doing tonight's show so that I can end my circle, so that I can get out everything that just gets triggered. And like I said, I got triggered before, but I never got triggered as deeply to the realization that this stuff needs to come out of me. Because now it makes sense to me more than ever why I react the way I do. And I don't want to continue reacting the way I do. I don't want to continue stopping the possibility of love in my life, for one. But I also don't want to continue holding on to scenarios that will make me so sensitive and angry on a moment's notice, like I got when I started seeing people's reactions to the political situation. Okay, I'm trying to heal, and I'm trying to convince everybody else to do the same. So anyway, yes, I have so many more notes, and I'm sorry I couldn't get to it. If I come up with, I may do a part 2 next week. I may continue on this concept because I do think it's important. I thank you for listening to all of my scenarios. That was kind of hard for me. It was easier doing it the second time around. I think that this is a huge step for me personally to start healing from it, because I've said it out loud. And when I say it out loud, I keep telling you, I put it out there, it comes back around in my ears, and it's like it's out. It makes sense to me. Okay. So tune in next Tuesday, 7 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time on ClearSourceRadio.com. And maybe I'll continue this. Maybe I'll go by my original scheduled plan on putting up barriers to progression that follows last week's show, really. But stay tuned right now for Tiffany Lewis on Be the Change, and I will talk to you next week. Love you all, and thank you so much. Good night.